I developed severe insomnia. I was having panic attacks. I was crying at everything, just a shell of myself, really. But still coming to work and being around my friends and putting on a brave face and kind of pretending that it was all good. Eventually, I was diagnosed with PTSD, and that experience of my life really led me to do what I am doing now. I started writing about being a dad.
Welcome to You've Got Game, the podcast that's all about playing to win in life. I'm your host, Marisa Kamal, and I'm thrilled to be your guide on this journey. On this show, I'll be talking to a range of guests who've faced adversity head on and come out on top. We'll be diving into their stories, uncovering the secrets of how they overcame their challenges, and learning from their hard-won wisdom. From entrepreneurs to artists, athletes to activists, our guests have one thing in common: they've got game. So come along for the ride as we explore the strategies, mindsets and habits of those who are thriving against all odds. Join me this week as we sit down with the ever-inspiring Elliot Rae, a distinguished speaker, author and mover in the sphere of social change. In our conversation, we delve into his purpose and the remarkable journey that has seen Elliot emerge as a force of nature in reshaping discussions around men's mental health and the parenting journey. In his own words, Elliot was always born to do something different. His journey started with a music social enterprise aimed at empowering the youth. His passion for leading people-focused, diversity and inclusion initiatives grew as he quickly rose through the ranks in the civil service. The birth of his daughter 7 years ago was a turning point in Elliot's life. Confronting PTSD, he felt lost and numb. This, however, didn't break him. Instead, it led to the inception of a game-changing platform. Elliot founded Football Fatherhood, dubbed the Mum's Net for Dads, a venture that would go on to have a substantial impact and redefine conversations around inclusivity, men and mental health. In our chat this week, you'll be privy to Elliot's inspiring story, a tale of resilience, innovation, and the drive to change the societal narrative. So, tune in as we discuss the difference one person can make when they decide to challenge the status quo. Welcome to this episode of You've Got Game. This is your host, Marisa Kamal, and today I'm joined by the wonderful and inspiring Elliot Rae. Welcome, Elliot.
Hey, Marisa, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I think we're very privileged to have you here. And just as I was reflecting before we formally started the recording, I've been following you on LinkedIn. I love your journey. I love what you're about. It resonates with me personally, having gone through a challenging time and deciding to leave a corporate career and focus on something that's more value-driven and purposeful to me. So with that in mind, for those that are listening that don't know you, could you perhaps give us a run through of your career and the highlights and where you are now and why you do what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I think my my desire to, I guess, always do something different started very young. So as a child, I was into music, played the trombone at primary school, and then through high school, I spent more time DJing than I did doing my work, which is good. I've always been into music, always been into football, and throughout university, I was the uni DJ, playing a lot of bashment and R&B and hip hop and stuff like that. And then after uni, I I was producing music and playing the bass guitar, so I was kind of doing that heavily alongside getting a job as well. I couldn't find a job after I graduated. I didn't think I knew what I was up against in regards to the inequalities and lack of experience and stuff like that. So I applied for lots of jobs, got nothing back. So my mum was working in NatWest at the time as a cashier, and she was like, "Why don't you come and work in the bank?" So I went for an interview, got the job, but I didn't know I'd be literally working next to her, like sitting next to my mum in NatWest
That's
bank.
So cute.
Seriously, it was like crazy. I was on my best behavior at all times. So I worked there for a couple of years. But at the same time, I was, heavily into music. I started a social enterprise called Make It Happen Music, which was going around Northwest London, Harlesden, Stonebridge, and areas like that, Kilburn, working with young people and teaching them how to make music. But really, it was a way into the conversation. So we would speak about, their challenges and drugs, gangs, all that sort of stuff. And I loved that work. It was amazing, really, really good. And then in 2010, and when the coalition government came in, they pretty much cut all the funding for all that sort of stuff. kind of, I think, preempted the riots in 2011. I wasn't surprised when the riots happened because there were loads of young people just with nothing to do. So I joined a temping agency and ended up in DWP as a PA. At the same time, I met my wife and I was in a band with my wife and we were doing, touring around the country and stuff, which was great. So I worked in the civil service for the first 5 years. I was a PA. I didn't really know about kind of corporate life. I didn't know where I was, how to operate in the space. And so I spent a long time as a kind of very junior member of staff. And then when I got to around late 20s, I realized, I want to get married and I need to move on with my career and do something. And I realized I could use my skills that I was doing in my social enterprise, that I was doing through facilitation, through working with people. I could use that in the workplace. And once I figured that out, my career changed quite a lot. So I went from an EO in the civil service to a grade 6 in the next 5 years, which is, it's going from basically very junior to one of the most senior members of staff in the HR team in the Treasury at the end of my career. And I worked in Department for Transport, in DEFRA, and last in HM Treasury. So had a long career doing people-based roles, leading race in DEFRA, leading diversity, inclusion, delivery in the Treasury, doing people-based roles in Department for Transport, chairing the staff parenting network. And I think that corporate career has helped me a lot. It's helped me to understand the politics of work, how change happens, and how to influence senior leadership, how to make things happen in a corporate environment as well. But alongside that, obviously, I became a dad, and that has kind of influenced my journey quite a lot as well.
I love that. So you've clearly had throughout your journey, even from from when you were maybe less so at NatWest, but when you did the social enterprise stuff and clearly into your more corporate career, you've always had, I guess, purpose as kind of the spine of that. You've been driven by that. Can you tell us like a bit more about that and perhaps now you're truly living with purpose and how you got to be in this position?
Yeah, sure. So while working in the civil service, became a father 7.5 years ago. And for us, that was a life-changing moment, as it is for all parents, I think. our journey into parenthood was a quite a challenging one. My daughter was born with an infection called Group B strep. And Group B strep is very serious. 1 in 10 babies will die. 1 in 14 will have a lifelong severe disability. So when she was born, she wasn't breathing. She was lifeless. And she had to be resuscitated. There was a doctor with a straw sucking fluid out of her airwaves and resuscitating her. And at the same time, my wife was bleeding out very, very heavily. And, it was definitely that moment in my life where I was helpless and numb and just hoping these doctors and nurses were going to do their job, right? I didn't know them 5-6 hours before, but now hopefully praying that they're going to, save my family's life. So we spent 2 weeks in the hospital, very, very challenging, ups and downs. Some days there was good news, some days there was bad news. Got home from the hospital after the good news that we could go home, had a weekend at home, a couple of days, and then back into the office, with a smile on my face. So trying to put on that brave face, my wife at home, who would struggle to leave the house, she had postnatal anxiety. We would go to the A&E about once a week. We were so worried about our daughter's health. Any temperature, anything, any little cough, we would just be at the A&E. And I developed severe insomnia. I was having panic attacks. I was crying at everything, just a shell of myself, really. But still coming to work and being around my friends and putting on a brave face and kind of pretending that it was all good. Eventually, I was diagnosed with PTSD. And that experience in my life really led me to do what I am doing now. I started writing about being a dad. I wasn't writing about what had happened at the beginning. I wasn't ready for that, but I was just writing about fatherhood and what had happened, and called the blog Music, Football, Fatherhood because I love music, I love football, I love fatherhood, so it made sense. And over the years, that's gone on to support thousands of men and dads through different ways that we engage with communities and we create content and we do campaigning. I think a couple of years after I started writing, I was in a cafe in Harrow, northwest London, and I had the day off. And I was in this cafe having a coffee with my wife, and I wanted to write about the blog. So I started writing about what it was like being a black dad and just being out and about on a Friday with my daughter and whatnot. And it's a really weird thing. I'm a Christian. I go to church. I believe in God, and I kind of feel like God wrote that article for me, to be honest, because I remember writing the first sentence. I don't remember writing the rest, and I remember finishing it and saying to Snelly, my wife, "Oh, I've written this article," and she was like, "Oh my God, it's really good. You should send it to the Independent." I was like, "Okay, cool." I didn't know anything about media or whatever at that point, but she found the editor's contact details on Twitter. So I emailed it to them. Straight away, they got back to me. They said, "This is great. We want to publish it. Have you got a picture?" So I was like, "Yeah, cool." I sent them a picture. We drove home about 20 minutes. And by the time I got home, it was published up on the Independent website. So that was about 4 p.m. By the time I went home, it had been shared around 10,000 times from their website. And the next day, it was shared about 30,000 times. It basically went viral. And that kicked off everything. That kind of took Music Football Fatherhood from being a little blog that just me and a couple of people were doing to something that people actually recognized and they visited and they saw as, a space for dads. And it took us a while to really think about, like, what do we want to do? What's our angle? What's, how are we engaging? What topics are we engaging? And I think over the years, as I have grown and the team has grown, we have got better at engaging and facilitating conversations with people. So we're all about open conversations about being a dad, and we do that through a variety of different ways. The first way is through content. So we written a book called Dad, which is a collection of 20 stories from different men who have been through all different experiences in regards to fatherhood, stillbirth, co-parenting, miscarriage, being a dad when you didn't have a dad growing up yourself, parenting a child with autism, all that sort of stuff is in there. And that led to a documentary called Becoming Dad. The book was actually in the BBC staff room, and a producer called Zach saw it. He read it, he liked it. He called me up one day and was like, "We want to tell your story on the TV." And I was like, "Are you crazy? Like, is this a scam?" Like, what the hell? But it was true. So we ended up filming a documentary called Becoming Dad, which I think is like one of the first programs on mainstream TV that highlights issues around dad's mental health and work-life balance and stuff like that. That ended up being one of the most 20 watched documentaries on the BBC network in 2022. So we do a lot of content. We also do community events. We partner with football clubs like Arsenal and QPR. Our last event was with Watford a few weeks ago, just before Father's Day. We've got Crystal Palace coming up as well. And we take dads into football stadiums. And we have conversations about, well-being and support networks and gender roles. And it's just amazing. Overlooking a pitch, we give them a piece of paper with a football pitch on it. We talk about that particular team and the support network around each player. And then we ask them to write down their 11-a-side support network. And it's a great exercise. Some dads will have a whole team of substitutes. Some dads might only have a goalkeeper and a striker, but it's a great way of kind of thinking about how we can strengthen and build our support networks. To do lots of community events, we also do Dads Do Hair, where we teach dads how to do hair, which is hilarious. Really, really fun.
I saw that.
Yeah, it's great. And the other side of our thing is campaigning. We're the founders of the Working Dads Employer Awards, and that celebrates employers that are supporting dads through, flexible working, paternity leave, good cultures, supporting dads on the way back from paternity leave, and all the work we do to support other organizations who are campaigning for enhanced statutory leave through government legislation as well. So busy, but I love the work I do, and it's a real blessing to be in a position, I guess, where I have a voice, where we can make things happen. We can have access to certain environments, whether that's through football or through the media, and we can help to amplify some of these issues. So, I feel so blessed to be waking up and doing this work. Even sometimes it's really busy, and it can get obviously stressful and overwhelming at times. But this is the stuff I dreamt of. I dreamt of being able to do this work every day. So yeah, really, really lucky.
Yeah. It's such an inspiring story, and it's crazy to think that from what you like, a simple blog post perhaps written by God, just like went viral so quickly. And clearly that's because people need to hear it. You know, they're ready for the conversation, and there's not enough people talking about it. I mean, from my own journey, I suffered with postnatal depression, and I remember my husband finding it really hard. And one night he said to me, he was like, I just don't know what to do. I like feel like maybe I need to speak to someone. And my response, now I realize it was wrong, but I was in a dark place. I was like, this, please just talk to someone else. Like, don't talk to me about it. I just can't take like any more, you know. And then he like went on his own journey with that. And I think because people feel so strongly, or it's, you feel like the mother's been through everything, I think that maybe makes it harder to talk, because it's like, wow, did you see what they went through in the room?
Yeah.
And, you know, and then they've been on this journey together, but actually it's really, really distressing. And, you know, ours, nothing like yours and not comparable, but just that journey that you have together, it's difficult and it's hard to support each other, because it's been so, it's just such an upheaval for you both. And that's why the work that you're doing is just so important. You know, and I love the analogy of the football team as well. Like, do you have people that you're talking to? If it's one, if it's two, if it's 11, you know, but it matters.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think what you're saying there in regards to like the men talking, and I think at the core of my message is that this is not, and I always am really careful about my messaging to make sure it's not coming across as a, you know, a versus or an us versus them, or who gets the more attention, or, you know, I think, and that's probably what stifled the conversation for so long, is that when men have spoken, it's been seen as taken away from support from women, for example. And it's, for us, it's never that. It's never saying, oh, our lives are harder, or you should, it's never that at all. It's saying like, yeah, you need more support. Definitely. We need support as well. Like, everyone needs support. Right? And it's not a versus. And I think that's a very good thing just in relationships in general. You know, the amount of times that people have young children, young babies, and for example, you know, the mum's at home with the baby, early months, dad's back at work. So many people I've spoken to through friends or through our organization, there's always resentment because the mum feels like they're doing all the work, the dad feels like he's doing all the work, and actually you're both just doing loads of work and you're both just tired. Right? Like, and it's about how do you just support each other and realize that maybe your experiences are different in this moment, but they're both really tough and you both need support, and you both need to, you know, support each other, but find support elsewhere as well. And that is at the core of what we do. It's always about how do we improve ourselves for the benefit of the family, and how do we make sure that everyone gets the support that they need at all the time.
Nice. I mean, we reflected on slightly earlier, until you have kids, you have got no idea how it feels, what it takes from mental and physical load. And I, you know, if I look back at my corporate career and the way I perhaps handled situations, or less handled, but the way that I thought about situations that were coming up, you know, parents asking for like extra allowances and flexibility, and I'd always give it. But in my mind, I'd be thinking that, is it really necessary? You know, it's a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, you chose it to get on with it. No, it's tough. Have like, even, you know, like my daughter's 7 now, and as a lot of kids do, they have issues with friendship groups at school. You know, it's nothing unique. Like, it happens a lot. I think happens with most kids, to be honest. And even just this morning, you know, having a chat on the way to school, and how, just thinking about, you know, how we help her to process her emotions, and how to navigate friendships. It's hard, you know, it's tough. It's not a physical undertaking right now. Like, that doesn't take, it's not physical, like I'm tired because I can't get up in the night and stuff, but the mental load of processing all of that. And I know so many parents have it, you know, some have it easier, some have it harder. We all have our own challenges based on all our circumstances, but parenting is difficult. It is really, really tough. It's really tough, you know, it's hard. And I don't think it gets easier, because as the kids get older, there's just different issues that come, you know, bullying and exams, and then the mental health crisis that we're having with young people. Like, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. So yeah, big respect to all parents, because it's tough. It's a hard job.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to all those parents
I'm
that I
sorry.
used to work with.
And I was the same. There was one, as I was saying before we started recording, there was one girl that I used to manage, and I was 25. Well, I say lady I used to manage, and she was a single mom, 2 kids, and she used to come in the office at 9:30 after doing a drop off, and get up at like 2:15 and grab all her stuff and run out, and then log back in the evening. And I had no understanding of the stress she may be under. Again, like you,
Yeah.
you need to leave. That's fine, all fine. But I had no real understanding of that must be hard. You're a single mom with 2 kids, ironing the PE kit, not forgetting the non-school uniform day, dealing with the tantrums in the morning. This one's
Yeah.
woke up here a nightmare in the middle of the night, running. Oh my God, am I going to be late? Is there train delays? Can I get to pick up my kids? And then you got to go home, put them to bed, dinner. But like that is on your own with 2 kids and a full-time job. Respect, because I had no idea. I had no clue. I had no clue.
I know, I hear you. Okay, so back to kind of like what's on your mind at the moment. So you've spoken about gender inequalities quite strongly, and particularly how they affect us all, not just men. Can you expand on that and bring it to life?
Yeah, sure. So I think at the core of all my work is engaging men in gender inequality work and in inclusion work more generally, and that comes through different avenues. So it may be through the fatherhood conversation, it may be through the men's mental health conversation, it may be through the manhood and masculinity and allyship conversation, or it may be through tackling online misogyny and the manosphere with your children conversation. So no matter how the avenue is and the basis of the conversation I'm having at any given time, through MFF or through my corporate work, it always goes back to how do we engage men in these conversations. And I think it is really important to engage men in these conversations, because for a long time, we as a society haven't understood that when we're looking at gender inequalities, of course, we know they affect women largely, but also there are many systemic and societal views and process and legislation and things like that also are quite damaging to men. So, prostate cancer is the most diagnosed cancer in the UK. It gets diagnosed very, very late, often because we don't go to the doctors. 3 out of 4 suicides are from men, but when it comes to self-referrals to the NHS talking therapies, only 1/3 are from men. The ONS did a survey and found that 1 in 5 men have no close friends. Men are more likely to be homeless, suffer from parental alienation. The list goes on. And I think largely that is, due to some process and legislation. But I think the bigger portion of causality is actually the ideas about what it means to be a man, and those conventional ideas about masculinity that we impose on ourselves and as a society poses on us as well. Those ideas that to be a man is to always be and only be strong, stoic, provider, breadwinner, all those sort of things. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being those things. We can be those things sometimes. That is a human experience. But at the same time, it's very damaging if we're saying to men, you can only be that. That's the only option. When actually, we need to be strong and stoic, but sensitive and vulnerable. We can be breadwinners, but we can be provided for as well. We can be protectors, but we need to be protected. We can be leaders, but we can be led, right? We need to be all these things at the same time, in the same day, in the same minute. That is the human experience. That is what allows us to have the resilience to get through difficult parts of our lives. That is what allows us to build strong and intimate male friendships. And loneliness has been seen to be very, very damaging to longevity. Men are likely to die earlier in our lives because we don't go to the doctors. So ridding that idea of we can't seek help and support for our mental and physical health is actually directly linked to our poor outcomes around suicide and mental health and physical health. So breaking down these ideas about what it means to be, a conventional man outside of those gender stereotypes is really good for men, because it fundamentally is important to our health, our relationships, our children's outcomes, our friendships, all of that. That message I don't think has been conveyed before, really, in a way that lands with people. And I think in doing those things, in working on how do we allow men to be outside of those conventional ideas of manhood, we are being allies at the same time. So in my conversation about engaging men in allyship, it normally starts from a position of being an ally, like to women. It's actually being an ally to yourself as well. You know, the fact that men are less likely to ask for flexible working, the fact that 1 in 5 dads don't take any paternity leave because they can't afford it because the statutory legislation is so poor. These are all things that affect men. But also, if we change, they also help women too. And it's not an us versus them. We're in this together. We need to find ways of how do we find solutions to help men to be their full selves and not the selves that society and maybe their parents or their culture or whatever it is has taught them to be. And I recognize that's easier said than done. You know, for a lot of us, we've had a lot of conditioning. We have perceived but also real barriers as well. We still live in a society that I think overwhelmingly does judge men in certain ways that fit that conventional masculinity. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's essential and fundamental to our success in family life, in health, and in work as well. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to find some solutions and platform the organizations that are finding those solutions as well.
That's really powerful. And actually, my own reflection on, you know, particularly in the corporate world, it's quite polarized. Like it feels them and us. And it really doesn't need to be. You know, if you go to like an International Women's Day event, it's all women. The same for International Men's Day, which is actually way less celebrated. You know, in a lot of organizations, it doesn't even get a mention, but it's about how do we join up to be kind of a bigger force of good and make a change. And can you tell me a bit, I know you said there's loads of organizations doing stuff. Are you kind of all connected together, or is that something you're looking to do a bit more of?
Yes, I think there's the Men and Boys Coalition, which is the group of organizations that are doing work on men's issues. So you might have people that are working on men's homelessness or addiction, fatherhood, you know, the range of different organizations that come together under the Men and Boys Coalition. And you know, I think they do need more funding and more support. They've been campaigning for a men's health strategy for years now, and that has had very little support from MPs and the wider media, if we're to be honest. And that's kind of going back to that issue of, I don't think society has recognized these issues exist and the impacts they're having on wider society. Because, you know, as men, we have lots of power and privilege. Of course, we have lots of power and privilege, and we need to understand that and do better in so many ways. But I think because of that, we don't make space to hear about some of the challenges that men are facing. So when men are invited in the room to talk about inclusion, most of the time it's from a position of how do you be a better ally to everyone else? And you are part of the problem, especially, you know, straight white men, you are part of the problem. And don't get me wrong, that's true to a large extent as well. Of course, that exists. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, and we need to continue to have that conversation. But alongside of that, and when I say that, I'm not saying that, you know, the men are the problem, so to speak. What I'm saying is, I think we can do better to be better allies. But alongside that conversation, men also have complicated lives. They also have lots of things that are challenging. They are also dealing with loss, bereavement, expectations, inequalities as well. And they just haven't been recognized for so long. And I think sometimes when they have been raised in a way which is sometimes quite divisive, or the people who are doing it maybe haven't got the tone right to make sure that they are including everyone in the conversation. And maybe it's come across as a bit more like, you know, taking away rather than actually why are we doing this for everyone. Say, for example, Fathers for Justice, for example. I don't know them personally, but I think a lot of the messaging kind of came across as a bit divisive. And I think now in 2023, there is space for this conversation to happen, but to happen in a way where we can bring everyone with us and understanding why we're doing it and actually get support from everyone else too. For example, you know, Pregnant and Screwed have released a new campaign, which we are supporting. I spoke at the launch at, that asks for enhanced statutory paternity leave in the UK. So at the moment, it's 2 weeks, which works out as £172 per week. The campaign is to get 90% 90% pay for 6 weeks, which is matching maternity statutory pay at the moment. This is amazing. This is a women's organization, a feminist organization that's fighting for better rights for men. At the same time, us, MFF, as an organization that is set up to support men, we do lots of work to support Pregnant and Screwed and other organizations like the Forces Society and stuff like that, because we understand we're in this together. We need to look at inequalities as a whole. And I think what we're seeing now is a section of society that wants that change to happen, is understanding that and is on the progressive side of things. But at the same time, the Andrew Tates and the whatnot on the other side of things as well. So it's very important that all the people who are thinking how we're thinking kind of come together and realize, how do we get our messaging right, and how do we support each other to make things happen as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love the work that you've been doing with Pregnant and Screwed and the campaigning for longer parental leave. Is make a huge difference, because in your situation, to rush back after 2 weeks as well, it's just like unfathomable. No time really just to spend as a family unit in a normal environment supporting your wife, and it's incredibly needed for society as a whole, and benefits both. On a smaller scale, so you talked about, potentially sometimes people get the messaging wrong and it comes across in the wrong way, so they're reticent to do it again. Can you perhaps give some advice to leaders within organizations who are hesitant to dive into conversations about whether it's race, mental health, gender, becoming a parent? What would you say?
I would say that no one's expecting you to be an expert on things. There's plenty of areas within DEI that I am not an expert in at all. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. Like, don't get me to come and talk on a stage about disability or gender identity. Like, I'm not qualified to do it, and I won't do the issues justice. I think what I can do and what leaders can do within that is they can learn. They can offer their support to the people who do understand the issues and can speak with authority. As a leader, you have so much positional power. You decide what's acceptable. You put in place process, which I think is so important. And then sometimes in DEI, we talk about culture, and that's my area, but process around this is so key as well. We have to have practices in place that ensure initiatives and change is sustainable. So you're completely responsible for that as leaders. You are responsible for resourcing the people who are doing the work, acknowledging the people who are doing the work, and celebrating the people who are doing the work. And I think it's about using your position as a leader to do that stuff, and don't always feel like you have to be the one on stage talking about the issues front and center. You can open the conversation, but you don't have to lead the conversation. And I think for leaders who are used to leading conversations, that's quite a big shift to be able to stand back. And that takes a very strong level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence to understand what your role is in this. But saying that, leaders are critical. I've never seen an organization being really inclusive without the leader and the leadership getting it and championing it. It just doesn't happen. You don't get an inclusive organization without leadership. You can have very good people on the ground, great staff, network chairs, great D&I leads, but if your leadership aren't supporting it, that stuff's not sustainable. So it kind of starts and ends with the leadership, and they need to understand their positional power in it. And as we were saying at the beginning, understand that this is not just a nice to have. It's not just a moral obligation. Actually, this is like fundamental to your business. We are seeing people leaving organizations because they don't align with their values. And we are seeing an increasing number of consumers spending money with organizations who align with their values as well. So this is critical to your business. It costs a lot of money to replace someone who leaves. It's better to retain your good staff. It's better to recruit good staff as well. So this is fundamental to business. It's not just a nice to have moral, thing that we're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the tone from the top and the ability to create a safe space. And like you said, diversity and inclusion more broadly fundamentally is better for the bottom line, top line, top and bottom line overall. And it's proven that companies that are more diverse are likely to be way more profitable. There's big studies on it from McKinsey and stuff, and they're just, really, really interesting. Just one final question for you, Elliot, and I know I haven't really given you any time to think about this, and it's quite tricky, so have a think as I'm saying it. But if you had a billboard that millions of people would see every day, what message or picture would you put on it and why?
I'm tempted to say something around the topics that I talk about. But I think if millions of people are going to see it every day, I think maybe I'll use it for something different. And I think what I would say probably, and one thing I've found that I think is really great for work, for communities, is like listening to people, like asking questions and listening to people and trying to understand people. I think if we can get to a point where we're not just listening to hear, we are listening to actually understand and digest and try and see where people are coming from.
Yeah.
Even if we disagree with them, I think then we can start making the steps to improving the world in so many different ways. I think we've all got a story. Every one of us has a story. I don't think we are very good at sharing our story, but probably bigger, I don't think we're very good at listening either. And I love it. If I walk into a room, whether it's a corporate talk I'm doing or whatever, I'm sharing, put people into breakout groups, we open the floor and someone says something that no one else in the room knew about them. And these are people that have worked together for years. They share their story, and the level of like connection and understanding, and okay, I get it now. I understand you. Like when it comes to connection and belonging and inclusion in the workplace, I think that's it. It's the sharing our stories, but understanding it, like taking time to understand each other. And I think what we figure out is that actually there's more that connects us, more we have in common than we think. But we don't get to that point where we're sharing at a level where we really understand. So I would put something like that. I would condense that down into a sentence for people to understand.
Yeah, like listen now.
Listen, share.
Actually, yeah. When I trained to be a coach a few years ago, the one thing that came out of that was active listening, and that's what makes a good coach, right? But equally, it's just improved my friendships tenfold, because I'm not trying to solve people's problems straight away. Like just listening to people and hearing them out, and then offering more of a perspective that makes them think about their own way of thinking rather than my opinion on everything, because you're never going to change. If you want to alter someone's opinion as well, you're not going to change it by just voicing your own. It's like what are the drivers? Why do they think like that? And it's so powerful, and it's fundamentally, like I said, it's changed my friendships more than anything.
It's powerful, isn't it? And it's something that's free, and you would think would come naturally because we are blessed, with the ability to speak and to listen, but we take it for granted. We don't learn how to communicate really, and there's a whole load of other stuff there, that stops us from sharing for a variety of different reasons, but we don't listen. And I think it is so powerful, just understanding where someone's coming from goes a long way. Yeah,
exactly. And just one last question. Where can people find you?
So I'm as you know, I'm always on LinkedIn. So check me out on LinkedIn, Elliot Rae. and go to elliotrae.com. And for MFF, go to musicfootballfatherhood.com. We have monthly sessions. Our next one is this week. We are doing a session with a counselor called Michael, and it's around intimacy, belonging, and connection in regards to fatherhood. And hopefully our next football event is with Crystal Palace on the 16th of September. So yeah, lots coming up there. So check out the website and get involved if you're a father.
Epic. Look, thank you so much. This conversation's been as inspiring for me as I thought it would be, and the reason why I approached you on LinkedIn, and I'm forever grateful. So thank you so much, and take care.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great. Keep doing the work. Thank you so much.